Hello everyone, welcome back to My Hero Academia Podfic. This will be the continuation of Research to Rescue. This will be Part 3, Chapter 3, entitled, You Want Me to Do What? Undercover. Shota Aizawa's voice was flat and unamused as he stared at the detective in front of him. Sukuuchi stared back, completely serious, as Nezu was fixing the tea. Though wordless, Aizawa was still asking, Why did you take me from work to propose this? However, what he was suggesting was reasonable. The timing was questionable. The break between school years started a week and a half away. There were still finals to give. Why they wanted him to take leave from his students to oversee a stealth mission was a question that needed an answer. Sukuuchi nodded as Nezu handed him a cup of tea. I don't mean anything bad when I say that you're not well known to the villain circuit, though you're still highly trained, so I wanted to ask you to go undercover in the Silver Dyer group until the new school year started. 5 months doesn't seem all that long. Will you be able to get the information you need in such a short window? Asked Nezu. His tone foolishly suggested that Aizawa had already accepted the mission. Aizawa picked up his own cup and took a quiet sip. It was scalding hot. He put the cup down. He liked coffee better. We just need a basic know-how of how the group is and where its bases lie. Anything additional will be great. Staying any longer until we can get an officer in would be dangerous since he's still a hero. Why not actually use an officer, then? Aizawa asked. Silver Dyer is dangerous. I have faith in my officers, but sending an underground and an unknown pro, who has more experience dealing with hand-to-hand contact with villains, it's much safer until we have at least some insight into what we're dealing with. Logical. Didn't mean Aizawa liked it. He grunted an affirmation. Why set up a mole now, Detective? Nezu started. Silver Dyer may be dangerous, but they haven't done anything big to warrant a whole mission. This was when Sukuuchi shook his head and sighed like he wished that was the case. I'm afraid that's incorrect. We've been keeping it out of the media, but Silver Dyer's attacks have gotten more frequent. 2 weeks ago, the rabbit had completed his 10th assassination in November. He's known to only commit 2 or 3 each month. Aizawa remembered how Hizashi had complained about the cuts on his face from the rocks once the fight was over. It's safe to assume that they're either gearing up for a power move against other villains or that they're trying to build their name even more. We want information on members so that we can start limiting their movements and cutting members where we can. Hizashi would kill him for accepting an undercover mission right after everything in the apartment was finally settled in, and that he wouldn't be there to help train Hitoshi for the UA Heroics entrance exam. If Silver Dyer was gearing up for something big, then 5 months away from home to take them down was better than staying and reaping the consequences of letting something bad go on for too long. Fine, I'll do it. Sukuuchi had an expression of both relief and surprise, like he wasn't expecting this sort of answer. Nezu's expression was just hard to read. Just return before the school year starts, and all's fine with me, he stated in a cheery tone. Aizawa would be careful to hide in plain sight, just in case someone actually knew who he was. Rabbit wouldn't recognize him due to his eyes being hidden behind goggles during their fight, but he still put in blue contacts and a pair of thin fake reading glasses. He had dyed his hair a light brown and would keep it tied back in a bun to keep it from flying up when using his quirk. With help, he decided that his alias would be Hirayama Masato. He was to be a low-key kind of criminal with a record of basic theft with claims to having slightly bigger uncaught crimes of murder. Hirayama had been arrested for a hit-and-run and served a short time in a local jail. He was entering the Silver Dyer to do more than petty thievery. The information was all backed up with fake records and a mugshot created by the police department. The mugshot edited slightly to make Aizawa look even younger than he was. There was even a shitty apartment, a former stakeout space, to act like his home base, if anyone asked. Aizawa would carry an audio recorder hidden in a watch. The watch was old, decently cheap, and well used to keep it from being suspicious. It was the only way to get more information immediately without having to wait the 5 months for things to get done. Sukuuchi had told him the mission probably wouldn't last the whole duration if things went well enough. An officer would be trained and ready to slip in as soon as it was deemed all right. Hizashi was standing on the other side of the bed, watching his husband go from dresser to the duffel bag, sitting open on the side of the bed that he took. It was late. Shinso would probably be sitting in his room or on his phone despite the time, and Hizashi had gotten off patrol only an hour and a half ago. He just left the shower, towel around his shoulders, when he noticed Shota's brand-new brown hair in the bag of his clothes. What are you even doing with that? Hizashi asked, tone wavering in uncertainty. He didn't know exactly what was happening. What was Shota doing? Did Hizashi do something? Please, tell me you're joking, Hizashi said when there wasn't a reply, arms crossed. He kept his voice calm and steady. Shota, who was currently throwing his less flashy and more disposable clothing into the bag, he sighed in answer. Before Hizashi could say anything else, Shota finally made eye contact. The harsh expression he got when concentrating on a task immediately softened, and he stopped moving completely. It's for a mission, Hizashi. I'll just be gone for a bit. Now Shota's voice was softer and more reassuring. Hizashi relaxed. He was overthinking this. Thank God he was overthinking this. Hizashi sat on the edge of the bed and watched Shota's back and forth. What's the job? He asked. Shota glanced at him as if thinking something over. 5 months undercover with Silver. Hizashi's eyebrows raised immediately. Silver Dyer. Really? He didn't remember marrying an idiot, though Shota would usually be the one saying that line. This isn't about that rabbit fight, is it? Shota shook his head. No. Tsukuchi thinks they're planning something big. If I can help take it down before people get hurt, then a few months away wouldn't matter. The wording was off, but the idea was the same. Stop the bads before they do bad and keep the people from getting hurt. This didn't mean Hizashi wasn't going to be bitter, however. Just the opposite. And you decided to leave your students to do it? It's a week and it's finals. You can handle that, right? Hizashi then moved to flop down on the bed, arms crossed under his chin as he watched the bag get full. Yeah. There was silence. Shota finished putting his clothes in the bag and sat down next to it, absent-mindedly looking around the room and carting a hand through Hizashi's still wet hair. You'll be back in time to help Shinso train for the entrance exam, right? I should. Tsukuchi said the mission might not even last the full 5 months. I'll be back in time. Hizashi, now fully understanding that Shota wouldn't drop it now, took in the other's appearance, the brown hair, the blue contact lenses. He still had his stubble, and a pair of plastic-framed glasses sat on top of his head like they were sunglasses. The blonde smirked. That isn't your color. Shota took his hand away and shot a look at the other. Shut it. Aizawa didn't say it, but there was a secondary reason for accepting the mission. It might have just been a hunch, maybe edging on personal, but it was the rabbit, despite what he told Hizashi. The rabbit was definitely a character that Aizawa was certain. Small, quiet, efficient, one of those villains who never seemed to get caught, if not by luck then by skill. What bothered Aizawa about the rabbit, however, was his reaction to getting his quirk erased mid-fight. Most people hesitate for a second. They tense up when they see that power of theirs they've relied on since childhood isn't working. In the seconds between Hizashi starting an attack and his own quirk working, the rabbit's shoulders dropped, noticeably like he was relieved his quirk had stopped. Then there was the question of what his quirk actually was. Evidence proved he controlled elements. That was a given when the statements from other pros and the rare videos of his fights were considered. But the smoke hadn't happened before. In the few videos there were of him, Rabbit had a thin gray smoke coming from his mask during tense situations. Popular theory was that it was built into the mask as a diversion tactic, but during the chase the mask was gone and thick black smoke had practically poured from his mouth. Aizawa would swear that there was a light in his throat, and there was blood on Rabbit's face afterwards, even if he hadn't done anything. If he didn't know better, Aizawa would say the guy had more than one quirk. He wanted to know exactly what this Rabbit guy was about. 6 days after leaving his comfortable apartment and family, after finding a contact, getting a sort of interview, and waiting 3 nervous days for an answer, Aizawa stood in a 2-person dorm on the first floor of a building, a duffel bag of clothing in one hand and the other tucked casually in his pocket. Honestly, the process of which surprised him. He was expecting it to be precise, not as precise as it actually was, though. Whoever was his roommate was out, and Aizawa was left on his own. He dropped the bag on the bed and sat down next to it. The metal springs creaked under his weight. Aizawa inwardly cringed at the sound. The bed was horrible. The room itself was horrible. As tall as the walls were, the ceiling was a clean arch overhead. The room still felt small. The beds framed the door, and the dressers were pushed against the ends. Desks were pushed into the far wall and paralleled the dressers, everything with either a stark white or a light gray. Folded neatly on the dresser was a pair of black slacks, a white button-down shirt, a black vest, and a silver tie. Everything here was so disturbingly uniform it looked like a cult, more than a name brand. Ugh, it was only 6:30 and Aizawa was already exhausted. All the white hurt his eyes, and it smelled like a hospital. Aizawa was about to get up and do a sweep for bugs when there was a knock at the door. He wasn't even able to get up before it slid open and someone stepped in. It was a young woman accompanied by a boy of her age. The girl had short white hair and gray eyes, seeming to be full of energy. The boy had dark red hair tied back in a ponytail and a dark pair of eyes as well. He looked more like a grump. The girl was in what could have been the standard suit and tie, while the boy was in jeans and a red hoodie. "So," started the girl with beaming curiosity, "you're the new guy." Aizawa, who'd been previously suggested to not act like a cold and brutally honest man that he normally was, put on a tired half-smile and answered with a simple, "Yeah." "Cool. I'm Kimiko Ayane, and this is Tagachi Ryunosuke. The dinner rush is going to hit the mess hall soon, so we wanted to take you there because you don't know where it is." Ayane smiled. Ryunosuke frowned. "There's no we in this situation." "I'm Hirayama Masato." Even though he'd rather sleep, Aizawa decided to stand up. "I'll take you up on the offer." The three were then walking down the hallway towards the mess hall. Aizawa then started to casually dig for more basic information. "Why is everything so plain here?" he asked, hands shoved in his front pockets. He was trying to push his tone to light and curious. Ayane hummed for a moment. "That's Midoriya's doing. Makes it harder for intruders to hide. Not that we get those. No one's that stupid. Except maybe you." Ayane poked Ryunosuke in the shoulder, getting a low growl from the boy. She laughed. Midoriya, that was a name to be marked for later. "Midoriya?" Aizawa kept his tone up. "He's the boss around here. He's super scary. Wears a lot of green so you can't miss him." Ayane was using wide hand gestures as she spoke. "A lot of the higher-powered members hang around him a lot. They're all the ones who don't wear the white shirts, so you'll know which ones when you see them." "I'd stay away from him. None of them are very friendly." At Ryunosuke's comment, Ayane made a noise to agree with him. Aizawa was quiet now. Around the corner up ahead, someone turned and started walking towards the three. Aizawa recognized him instantly thanks to the mask. Ayane, who was talking wildly about something else, lowered her voice as he passed. Now knowing about the color ranks, seeing the dark green shirt confirmed Rabbit was a higher-ranking member. Aizawa watched Rabbit pass by and glanced behind him. Once the guy was gone around the corner, Ayane spoke up. "Stay away from that guy, too." "Why?" Ayane looked over at Aizawa over her shoulder. "That's the Rabbit. Midoriya gets him to figure out Hiro's weaknesses. Smart guy. Reads people like a book. He's one of Midoriya's go-to assassins, too," said Ryunosuke. "Oh!" Ayane jumped in. "I heard he even worked with the technical team on something before we got here, and they do all sorts of stuff with quirks and gear." She looked back at Aizawa again. "He's super jumpy, though. Someone once tried to get his attention during a group mission, and he almost punched the guy off the roof." "I suggest going to him for information. Just don't get involved with his personal life," Ryunosuke added. "Midoriya wasn't ever a fan of people getting close to him anyways." Aizawa took note of that. They stopped at two dark gray doors. Ayane pushed them open and revealed a mess hall. It had more grays and muted colors than the hallways, and it was much needed of a break for Aizawa's eyes. The three got their trays of whatever was being served, and Aizawa ended up at their table for the rest of dinner, learning more of the tiny things about how the system here worked. It took Izuku about a week to actually interact with the new guy he'd seen earlier, the one who looked tired and like he wanted to be in bed, not walking behind Tadachi and Kimiko. Hirayama Masato. Izuku had done some digging for the dire analysis notebook, one of the few secret collections of villain information that he kept in the hollow space under the dresser he had, which broke not long after Izuku started to regularly stay in the room and made a much appreciative hiding place if the broken pieces were put back. All the information he could get from Hirayama's past records was written down, with space left to analyze fighting style and quirk if he ever got the chance. Hirayama had a string of robberies, claimed multiple murders, and spent an oddly little amount of time in jail for a hit and run, none of which seemed all that dangerous, so he marked the guy as unimportant and probably boring. Even seeing him in the hall wasn't that special. The guy just gave Izuku a suspicious look as they parted ways. Seeing Hirayama alone after his first mission, however, was a different thing altogether. The guy was lost. Go figure everything here looked the same until you figured out the hallway tricks. And looking at one of the numbered doors like he'd seen it 6 times, and this was the 7th. Aggravation practically swarmed his face, and the numbers would have caught fire if possible. Despite this, he had an air of calm around him. Izuku was getting back from his own mission, mask still donned as the task was merely the neighborhood over, when Hirayama spotted him. Both stared at each other for a moment, before Hirayama cracked a small smile. It looked a little forced. He had a pair of goggles hanging around his neck, made with the same one-way glass as Izuku's own. He had gloves, too. Smart. His weapon seemed to be some sort of fabric that wrapped around his waist, tied almost like a sash. It looked odd, if Izuku was honest. "You know where the labs are." Izuku walked past him and waved a hand to signal the older guy to follow. All that could be heard were his louder footsteps and Izuku's softer ones. Izuku was on his way to the labs anyways, to turn information in that he'd taken from the target's lab once he was out, as per instructions. "So, who are you?" Izuku glanced behind him at the other. Hirayama looked curious. Izuku had given his name a few times to other people. Most of those people were executive members, however. Very few actually wore plain shirts. Hizashi almost always referred to him as Rabbit if someone else was in the room, and everyone else eventually did too. It became habit for everyone to refer to him as Rabbit, though the reason why Hizashi started this was entirely unknown to Izuku. His name wasn't that important anyways, so he stopped bothering. Hirayama, however, still had that calm air. Something about him radiated trust. Hirayama had an eerie sense of familiarity, too. In a good way, though, if that was even possible in their line of work. So, in a moment of idiocy, he gave the new guy the benefit of the doubt, and casually pulled his mask to sit around his neck like a necklace. "Rabbit." Izuku really wasn't comfortable enough to give his name, but he was talking. Outside of his room or Hizashi's office, he didn't have much reason to chit-chat. Talking to people meant trouble. More than enough times he chatted someone up, they played friends, and then they either used him to get closer to Hizashi. Mostly by giving out information about Izuku that Hizashi already knew, but appreciated tactics anyway. Or they left the main base to a different location. The particularly nicer ones ended up doing this. This was as comfortable as he could be. Now it was all about how much or what he said to Hirayama. "That's not your real name," Hirayama said flatly. "To everyone else it is." The rest of the walk was quiet. All right, everyone, this concludes Chapter 3 of Research to Rescue. Chapter 4 will be next, and as always, thank you so much for listening.